This is all the time of year on.
So far, 29.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. This is Tracy Zimmerman. we're going to start in a couple of minutes. It's a little before 10, but I would love it if you would do me a favor. If you've done a webinar with me before, you know I always ask this. I want to just confirm that you can hear me. So if you'll type, somebody will be brave, or more than one, to type in the questions box that you can hear. I would be greatly appreciative. Awesome. All right. So we are 2 minutes of 10, and we will start in just a moment.
Oh, on your thing, it's not showing up for us. Okay. It's like,
yes. Good morning, everyone. This is Tracy Zimmerman. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. So pleased that you are joining us this morning to talk about early learning and the Every Student Succeeds Act and North Carolina State Plan and approach for implementing that. If you plan to tweet today, we have a hashtag up, ESSA1468591057, so please go ahead and use that. And we will go ahead and get started. I just want to give you a little background about the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation. Our vision is that each child has a strong foundation for lifelong success and reading proficiency, supported by the nation's best first aid system. We focus on convening and leveraging and aligning the amazing work that's happening in our state towards a shared agenda. And if you have been engaged at all with our Pathways to Grade Level, a set of common measures that folks have come to agree upon, and we're now working to better understand and figure out how we align our policies and funding and practices to advance. We also work on building public will and promoting practice and policy, and certainly engaging folks around ESSA, or the Every Student Succeeds Act, falls strongly within that. Our agenda for the day is we will start with an overview of what are the early learning opportunities in ESSA, then talk a little bit about the state role, then about the role of the local education agency, opportunities for collaboration, and then next steps. There are a couple of ways to participate today. You'll see we'll have time for questions and actually also be asking a specific question of you. The easiest way is to type in the type in the questions box. I will be following that, and we will share those. You also can raise your hand on this symbol here, the hand sign in the left side of the control panel, and I'll know that to unmute you. So just as a high-level overview before we dig in, the Every Student Succeeds Act is the new federal education law. It's the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. There's certainly been a lot of discussion about it nationally. What's really exciting about the law is that early learning is very intentionally woven throughout it and included in every title. I just had the privilege of being in Washington, D.C. with some of the folks who were engaged in helping to develop that, and they really emphasize this point that every title in the law does mention early learning. And they also emphasize that they expect states to engage stakeholders, which is part of what this webinar is about, to develop a state plan and to specifically address early learning. So this is an exciting opportunity for North Carolina. And the other piece I want to share that I think is really timely about this is that we also have a recognition from the General Assembly and the state that it's really important that we begin to work and collaborate in a birth to 8 way, even more intentionally than we already have. And so what you see on this screen is part of the special provisions that were passed by the General Assembly that really hone in on coordination and consultation, not just across HHS and Health and Human Services and the Department of Public Instruction, which do talk and have certainly worked on early learning, but also with other agencies and organizations that work in this space. So it's really an opportune moment as both of these things come together in North Carolina. So we are very privileged to have an amazing panel with us today. We have Dr. Lou Fabrizio, who is the Director of Data Research and Federal Policy at the Office of the State Superintendent at DPI. All of the bios are on our website, so you can learn more about these very experienced folks with us. Donna Brown is the Director of the Division of Federal Program Monitoring and Support for DPI. And then John Pruette is the Executive Director of the Office of Early Learning at DPI. So we definitely have the experts and leaders in the room with us, which is a great opportunity. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to give me a nod when he would like me to advance his slides, and we'll get started.
Great, and I'm happy to be here this morning, and I'm happy and heartened that so many people are on this call. I think we had 150 people register for the call, so an important topic, and so glad you're out there listening. I think as I go through this presentation, I'll speak to specific opportunities that are embedded in the law, but overall, I think the overriding opportunity that exists for our state is one of strengthening the early care and education continuum across birth through grade 3. We know that the answer to school success for all children is tied to improving not only the overall condition of children, but also the capacity of programs in schools to support their growth and development. So there's much in this reauthorized law that recognizes the importance of early learning and helps us along this path of building a strengthened continuum. As we begin to discuss the law, I want to take some time to speak to a couple of different grant opportunities that are available to our state. One is the Preschool Development Grant, and one is Literacy for All Results for the Nation, or the LEARN Grant. Let me provide a little bit more detail. Preschool Development Grant is a competitive grant funding to improve coordination, quality, and access for early childhood education for low and moderate income children from birth to age 5. It's similar to, but not exactly like, the previous round of preschool development grants that were offered jointly and administered jointly by the U.S. Departments of Health and Human Services and Education. This grant, too, will be jointly administered by those two departments. But funding must first be used to conduct periodic statewide needs assessments of the availability and quality of existing programs in the state, the unduplicated number of children served, and the unduplicated number of children awaiting services. must be used to develop a strategic plan that recommends collaboration, coordination, and quality improvement activities. It must maximize parental choice and knowledge about the state's mixed delivery system of existing programs and providers. It must share best practices among early childhood education program providers to increase collaboration and efficiency of services. After all of those activities are met, improving the overall quality of early childhood programs in the state should be a focus, as well as expanding access to existing programs or developing new programs to address the needs of unserved children. It's important to note that the statutory language in the law limits the Secretary of Health and Human Services and Secretary of Education from certain regulatory activities, including defining early learning and development guidelines, standards, or specific assessments. However, it's very clear that programs that speak to and adhere to high quality standards will be viewed favorably in this competitive competition. Literacy education for all results for the nation. It helps states develop or revise their current comprehensive literacy instruction plans, and in that revision or development provides targeted subgrants to early childhood education programs and local education agencies and their public or private partners to implement evidence-based programs that ensure high-quality comprehensive literacy instruction for students most in need. It must address high poverty communities. States under this program will be allocated, state grants will be allocated on a competitive basis. Interested states must conduct a literacy needs assessment to identify literacy proficiency gaps, and not less than 50% of the grant funds can be used for state and local programs and activities pertaining to children birth through kindergarten, so that funds the subgrants. The state education agency that receives a program grant must consult with other stakeholders when awarding this competitive subgrant to support high quality early literacy initiatives, and that includes the agency that administers the state pre-K program and the Early Childhood Advisory Council if the state has one, which North Carolina does. Let me move on to some big opportunities I think that are embedded in the law. The first one is really around improved coordination. Districts must, regardless if they elect to use Title I resources to support their early learning initiatives, undertake activities that increase coordination with early childhood education programs. This includes, for example, developing and implementing a systemic procedure for receiving records, establishing channels of communication, conducting meetings with families and other programs, organizing and participating in training related to transition to elementary school. So those of you who are familiar with the language regarding early learning coordination contained in the state budget bill will recognize the similarities here in this bill and the state budget and the respective charges. So I think there's a real opportunity around improved coordination. Another big opportunity is around parent and family engagement. Title I funding authorizes spending focused on promoting family and parent engagement. Eligible funding uses, and I emphasize the word uses, is an eligible way to use the money but not a mandate, include supporting schools and nonprofit organizations in providing professional development for district and school staff about parent and family engagement. This professional development may be provided jointly to teachers, principals, other school leaders, specialized instructional support personnel, paraprofessionals. I emphasize early childhood educators and parents and family members. So there's a push to sort of move out beyond the schoolhouse doors and into the early learning community and opportunity there. Our next big opportunity is around improved quality and effectiveness of the workforce. Title II funds are aimed at improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school personnel. They may be used for a variety of professional development activities. It's important to note that the language also highlights early learning specific uses. ESSA specifies that state and districts may use Title II formula funds for states to support teacher training, support training teachers, principals, early childhood education program directors, and other early childhood education program providers to participate in joint efforts to address transitions. That's completely consistent with our state budget provisions. And at the district level, districts may provide programs to increase the knowledge base of teachers, principals, on proper instruction in the early grades, and provide programs designed to increase the ability of principals to support teachers and early childhood educators to meet the needs of students through age 8. So a very particular focus on improving the capacity of schools to meet the needs of students regardless of their condition, consistent with our current state school readiness definition. Finally, excuse me, under ESSA, states must submit Title I plans to the U.S. Department of Education. As part of this planning requirement, the new law calls on states to describe how they will assist school districts and elementary schools that elect to use Title I funds to support early childhood education programs. This requirement, coupled with the budget provision highlighted earlier in the presentation, provide a tremendous opportunity for the state to build upon past collaborative efforts to strengthen our system of early care and education from birth through grade 3.
Thanks, John, for providing that overview. And if folks also participated or had an opportunity to look back on our April webinar, then you also hopefully have a good perspective of what the various opportunities are. So we want to take a moment to reflect, and based on what you've heard and what you've read previously, ask you to respond in the questions box, and I will actually share this on the screen. Given the opportunities outlined, what would make the greatest impact for North Carolina's birth to 8 children? And you can respond again by either typing in the questions box or by raising your hand. And we'll also send this out as a survey following the webinar as well. Do folks have any thoughts they want to share now? We can go on to the next question, or we can take a moment to talk about this. All right, I'm going to go on to the next one, but we'll send these out as a survey following the webinar as well. As you think about the fact that early learning is woven throughout ESSA, and you think about our state system and what we're strong at, are there particular strengths that you want to be sure that the folks working on the state plan build upon through ESSA? And again, you can type in the questions box or raise your hand. Okay, I'm starting to see lots of responses here. So I'm going to read them just so that folks can get a sense of what we have here. The Learn Grant, I believe, would make the most difference. To have well-qualified and compensated early education teachers. To focus on infant and toddler quality and supporting the workforce. More alignment between public school work and early childhood work, bridging the gap on the local and state level. A seamless transition from birth to 8. Local districts support Smart Start early childhood partnerships to coordinate community-based transition to kindergarten work. High level of programs at 4- and 5-star levels. NC pre-K and pre-literacy programs. So again, these are the strengths to build upon. Working with other early educators, transitioning opportunities for families with young children, more alignment, closing the gap. Great, this is excellent starting ideas of things to think about. And I think some of these, the next question some answers got to this, but let's just take a moment and also consider, are there challenges that we could address through ESSA? Okay, so expanding high-quality preschool programs. Integrating family voice into our work. Very important. Alignment of early childhood programs, especially with 4-year-olds. The biggest challenge we see in meeting the needs of people who are not in the system. Connecting the 0 to 5 and K through 2 systems. Breaking down the silos that exist in early childhood systems. Early literacy coaches for private child care programs. Challenge to address disconnect between elementary administrators and their understanding investment in early childhood. I'm just going to comment on that. When I was in DC, one of the things that was really pointed out, and I know the National Association of Elementary School Principals has a real focus on this, and it can be addressed through ESSA, is the professional development of principals and K through 3 teachers on child development and child development practices. Bridging the real and perceived silos between early education and public education, better collaboration and coordination of early childhood service providers. Great. So these are really beginning ideas that we can think about. And what I will do, again, is we'll administer this as a survey following the webinar, and I will also synthesize the comments that were made here and share those back out with folks as well, because that may help spur some additional ideas. So we're going to move on to our next presenter, Dr. Lou Fabrizio, and he is going to highlight, he is taking the lead on developing the state plan, and he will highlight what that looks like and things that the field should be aware of.
Okay.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you, Tracy, and I'd like to thank all of the participants for being part of this. I'm having a hard time getting used to looking at a PowerPoint slide that has my picture on every one that I'm talking about. In my 42 years in education, I don't think I've ever had that opportunity to view that. For those of you that have been keeping up with the reauthorization, and you know that it took for the doing it, the president was able to sign, and with July, and we've already done lots of things prior to today, including having public comment sessions across the state. We different Oregon state will be conducting more of those in the fall. But right now, although I am the plan development, there are numerous people, including Donna Brown, John, and many others at the department that are to make this happen. The goal is to have a plan, and it will not have answers to all of the questions. In places in the plan, it might say, here is where we will insert whatever decision is made about a particular issue, because we have not made any decisions to date. So that's the most important thing for folks to know. So we will have that draft plan hopefully by the end of August. During the month of September and October, as I said, we'll have some more public feedback. We'll have meetings across the state, and we'll be obviously then making updates and revisions to the plan as we continue to get that kind of feedback. If all of the stars are in alignment, we would hope to have as close to a final plan as possible by the end of November, with the goal of then being able to present something to the board to approve potentially in December. Now, I want to be real clear. The State Board will be hearing a monthly report from us, so it is always advisable for you to look on the DPI website and access the State Board of Education link and get a chance to look at the agenda, because from now until we submit our plan to the U.S. Department of Ed, we'll always have an agenda item that I think right now is going under new business, and it'll be an update on ESSA. As part of the law, we are required to give the governor 30 days to review the plan before it's submitted to the U.S. Department of Ed. The governor does not have to sign or approve the plan, but has to be given 30 days to review it. What's not on this timeline is something also very important that's happening in November, and it's not Thanksgiving. You know that we do have a presidential election. There will be lots of changes. We'll have a gubernatorial election, a state superintendent election, and so there's the potential for lots of things to change depending on what happens during the election process. And then just to add a little bit more excitement to this timeline and the task at hand, many of you are familiar with the fact that we currently have a state law that mandates that we generate school performance grades, usually referred to as the A through F system. The new ESSA, in that law, it has certain required indicators that have to be part of a state accountability plan. Right now, the school performance grades from the General Assembly do not have all of the necessary components that the new ESSA requires. And you probably know that the General Assembly will not be coming back to town until middle of January. Now, again, they may have to come back because of the Wake County elections process, but our feeling is they're not going to be coming back into the long session until the middle of January. And if our plan includes some additional components to the A through F grading system, then we're going to be at the mercy of the General Assembly in terms of whether or not they're going to agree to make some of those changes in state statute. If they should decide not to do that, then we being the State Board of Education, will have to come up with some other way of extracting certain pieces from the components of the A through F grading, and then adding in the other necessary ingredients based on the new ESSA to then come up with some other kind of outcome, which we think will be very unfortunate if we get to a place where we'll have to, on one hand, say, here's the A through F grade that a school received under state statute, and here's the 3 stars or 4 stars that the State Board is assigning based on the full components to meet ESSA. So we're going to have quite a challenge. I should have put at the top of this the draft submission timeline, because it's very possible that we will not be able to meet the March 6th opportunity to submit our plan to the U.S. Department of Education. It turns out in the draft proposals there are only 2 opportunities for states to submit their plan, once in March and once in July. Obviously, if we submit our plan in July for a plan of implementation in the 17-18 school year, we will be several months into that 17-18 school year before we'll even know if our plan has been approved. So that is a little bit unfortunate. So that's enough on the timeline. One of the other things that you'll notice in the new law is the old law, No Child Left Behind, used to make references to core academic subjects, and the new law makes references to what's referred to as well-rounded education. And you'll see that because there are these new things that are being specifically mentioned in the new ESSA, we are hearing from lots of different constituency groups and organizations because they all want some place to see their organization or their content area mentioned in the state board's plan. So we do have to figure out ways to make that work and make it make some sense. The next thing that you should already be aware of to some extent is that the U.S. Department of Education has issued what is called a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, which has the acronym or the initialism of NPRM. And in the Federal Register on May 31st, they posted draft regulations related to accountability, data reporting, and consolidated state plans. If you access that Federal Register, it's an 83-page document because the federal government likes to talk about it in terms of here is a current regulation dealing with a specific issue. Here is what we think we want to change it to, so that's their proposed thing, and they'll explain why they think it should be the way they're proposing it. And it's up to the general public to review those draft proposals, draft proposed regs, and offer comments to the U.S. Department of Ed of things that you either like or things that you don't like. And the comment period ends on August the 1st. So there are lots of different groups right now that are digging into those 83 pages to look and see certain things that they're concerned about. And there are some things that we as a state are concerned about. One of the simplest is that, you know, the proposal of 2 dates to submit our plans, March and then July. We think there should be at least one other date in between those two, so that every 2 months a state could submit a plan. The way that you can access these kinds of materials, there's 2 different ways. You could just simply go to ed.gov, which is the U.S. Department of Education's website, ed.gov. There'll be a link there that says Every Student Succeeds Act. You can click on that, and that'll take you to a vast amount of information. Likewise, you could go to the NorthCarolinaPublicSchools.org, which is our DPI website. Under highlights, you'll see a link called Every Student Succeeds Act, and you can also access some information there as well. So the draft plan that I mentioned earlier that we hope to have by the end of August, we will be posting that draft plan on our DPI website. And once it has been posted on that website, we will then communicate that out to the general public through all different mechanisms. And Tracy, I'm sure will make sure that all of you get an opportunity to see that as well.
I'm just going to interrupt really quickly to also say that national groups like the First 5 Years Fund are following the regs as well and putting out suggestions in terms of early learning. So that's another place to follow, and we'll certainly share that as well.
That's great. And even though some of those national organizations are making comments, if you get your hands on those before August the 1st and you agree with some of those comments, it would behoove you to send your own set of comments. You know, you can cut and paste some of their stuff, but try to make it look more appropriate from your personal perspective or professional perspective. The more comments the U.S. Department of Education receives, we hope the more likely they would be to consider making some changes to those draft regulations. The next part that's in that set of draft regs is listing 5 parts to the state's plan, and we're making reference here to what's called a Consolidated State Plan. States are not required to submit a Consolidated State Plan, but our intention is to do that. Again, this is in the proposed regs, but right now 5 components: consultation and coordination, academic standards and academic assessments, accountability, support, and improvement, supporting excellent educators, and then supporting all students. So right now, the draft that we're envisioning putting together will probably contain those 5 components. There are certain things that we're required by the law to also include in our plan that may not fit nicely into these 5 different parts. So we'll probably have to add another section that gets at all of those regulatory requirements that we'll have to meet. The other thing that you'll see in the draft regs is our state plan must describe a system of performance management. So we've got to be able to describe the process we'll be using to support development review and approval of the activities in those LEA plans, which Donna will be talking about in a few minutes. In our state plan, we have to address how we will monitor those LEA plans, how we will work toward continuously improving implementation and providing differential technical assistance to LEAs and schools. The other part that we'll be required to do as part of our consolidated state plans, in the past, whenever we've had to submit plans to the U.S. Department of Education, there are always assurances that have to be agreed upon, or the state has to agree and assure that they will do certain things. In this particular slide, we just list some new assurances which are different to assurances that we have had in the past. And interestingly enough, we will have to be submitting our assurances by March the 6th, even if we're not going to be submitting our plan until after that date. And I've already mentioned the 2 dates in the proposed regs. And I believe that it now moves to Donna. So thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, Lou. We really appreciate you sharing all of that detailed information. And we're very excited to have Donna Brown with us, and she is going to talk more about the perspective from the local education agency.
Good morning, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to work with our stakeholders. We certainly consider everyone on this webinar to be one of those. And so we will be anxiously awaiting the feedback that Tracy is able to provide us from both the poll during the webinar as well as the survey that's sent out afterwards. I'm going to narrow the focus a little bit. You heard John speak sort of broadly to the opportunities that are woven throughout ESSA, and I'm going to speak from the perspective of the Title I Part A funds, because that is one of the most significant fund sources that North Carolina receives that is available to support early learning and, in particular, preschool programs, high-quality preschool programs. And so in the local plan development, this is where it's really going to be important for stakeholders to share their perspectives. As you heard Lou mention, there are opportunities not just for focusing on early learning, but for focusing on student support services, for focusing on other areas outside of what was previously considered core content. So there will be lots of folks making a case for why this needs to be included in the local plan. For Title I Part A, the local plan is where those decisions are made. They have lots of flexibility. I know that Lou and I have shared with others in terms of the state plan development. Our goal will be to meet the requirements of what are outlined in federal statute, but to offer as much flexibility as possible in the way we develop that plan so that the real decisions can be made as close to the classroom as possible. In terms of plan development, it all starts with and continues to begin with a comprehensive needs assessment under ESSA. And we have had a long-standing history of encouraging districts to include in that assessment of needs things like kindergarten readiness and existing preschool opportunities that may exist within the school community. So if there is a need and there is a lack of availability, that become a consideration of how you might spend your Title I funds. I've already spoken to the timely and meaningful consultation. That's a requirement at the local level as well. There has always been a provision in the law under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which ESSA is reauthorizing, that there were coordination with other fund sources and other funding streams that are appropriated through other acts outside of what will now be ESSA. But they call out some specific that had not been in the law under No Child Left Behind. and in particular, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity, Head Start, and the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. And I can tell you that Head Start was addressed in terms of coordinating Title I funded preschool programs, but they never explicitly stated that you had to coordinate with programs offered under the Head Start Act at the district level. And this is now specifically addressed in the district planning. Districts will have an opportunity to submit what's called a consolidated application. We currently have a grants management system in the state that consolidates most of the federal entitlement programs as well as a few competitive grants. And so we've already got a good system in place to help folks be able to accomplish that consolidated application and the coordination with those other programs. You heard Lou mention a shift from core subject to well-rounded education. And in the district plan, they will now have to describe how they will provide students with a well-rounded program of instruction. For the first time, districts will also have to describe how they are going to reduce the overuse of discipline practices that remove students from the classroom. And we thought that was an interesting shift. And more of an acknowledgement of the importance of how student behaviors must be considered in terms of a student's academic success. It also explicitly calls out career and technical education and speaks to experiential learning or work-based learning opportunities. And most of these things were always allowable under Title I Part A, but now they are explicitly defined in a way that we hope that folks will give these things careful consideration when they determine how to use their local dollars. Did want to make you aware of one thing I sort of alluded to earlier. There are likely to be some competing interests as local districts develop their plans. There has always been a provision in Title I Part A that equitable services are provided for private school students who are residing in particular attendance areas of Title I schools. And the new law now requires, and what you see at the top of the screen is basically lifted from the law. And what it's saying is that before a district determines how much money each of its schools will get, it has to first reserve funds for the private school equitable services. This has been done in reverse historically. And so the question that we're wondering in the days to come as we receive additional guidance from the U.S. Department of Education is, does this mean possibly that the per pupil amount for private schools could exceed that of the LEA schools? And the answer is maybe. We're waiting to see some scenarios of how that would actually play out. And just wanted you to be aware that this was sort of an additional restriction on some decision making at the local level. And now down to the school level, because sort of the purpose and intent of Title I is what I mentioned earlier, is that decisions are really made by school leadership teams. And it does explicitly broaden the use of school funds, particularly in Title I school-wide programs, but also in targeted assistance programs, which are interesting because in the past, the use of funds in those programs has been pretty restrictive. It's a little broader now as well. And it includes things like counseling and school-based mental health programs. And as you heard John mention, it also speaks to a school-wide tiered model to prevent and address problem behavior and early intervening services. So it was always allowed before, but now there's some language that makes it a little more explicit.
Thank you, Donna. So what we're going to do next is Donna is going to come back and talk a little bit about what the opportunities are in terms of collaborating with schools and with LEAs, and then we'll take some time after that for questions.
Well, just continuing the theme of what the big opportunities are, collaboration really around seeking input to inform the state plan and input to inform LEA plans, I think is a huge opportunity that lies in front of us. In response to ESSA the Education Commission of the States commissioned a report entitled Collaborative Stakeholder Engagement. The report recognizes that stakeholder engagement and collaboration are essential to the development of an effective state plan and encourages states to move beyond the traditional stakeholder engagement model, which is one more focused on providing information, to one that fosters meaningful collaboration. A simple proven framework captured in a sentence called the collaborative premise demonstrates how states can build consensus around goals and outcomes. The premise states, if you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and strategies for addressing the shared concerns of the organization or community. We all know that successful efforts of collaboration can transform a diverse group of stakeholders into a constituency for change that has the influence and credibility to achieve real results. With that in mind, this report offers the following questions as a guide to create a credible and collaborative stakeholder engagement. What is there to collaborate about? Really, from the beginning, the conversation needs to be framed in an open and engaging way to build trust in the process among stakeholders. Whose work is it? Stakeholders need to come to the table who share responsibility for the current situation, are affected by the issues, and must be part of the solution. Who has the expertise to provide information needed to make good decisions? It's imperative to seek out experts who can provide reliable information to help stakeholders build a deeper understanding of complex issues. Who has the credibility to bring stakeholders together? Find partners. It's important to find partners with credibility and influence to bring a diverse group of stakeholders together. Strong partnerships need to be built with groups that reflect the interest of key stakeholders. How do stakeholders work together? It's imperative to create a credible, open process that allows stakeholders to learn together, diagnose the situation, explore opportunities, develop strategies, and put them into action. And who will energize and sustain the work? Search out stakeholders who are willing to be able to provide strong process leadership to help facilitate and sustain the collaborative work. I think that really is the challenge in front of us, how we work together in a meaningful way that informs both the state plan and particularly the local LEA plans to build a focus that builds a strong continuum and supports all children's learning across birth through grade 3 and through grade 12. So thank you.
Thanks, John. And actually, before I take questions, I think it's a good, John's remarks are a good segue to say, so this webinar is the second that the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation has organized around ESSA, but we hope to go beyond just presenting and sharing information in this manner. And in addition to the survey, John and I and others plan to work together to develop a more in-depth set of questions to engage people and perhaps convene folks around really getting to that point of a collaborative response and a collaborative vision and plan for moving forward. And many of you, I believe there are folks from LEAs on the webinar, as well as Smart Start Partnerships and other early learning, already in your communities have excellent working relationships of which you can now use this as another vehicle to continue to build that 1st to 8 alignment. So let's take a moment and see if there are questions for folks. Again, you can do that by either raising your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type it in the question box. And I'll just, I know it takes a minute or so for people to think and for questions to pop up. So we'll give everyone a moment to think about that. And as that's happening, because silence makes me crazy, I think, I want to hone in on one of the things John and Lou and Donna, I'm particularly excited about are the professional development opportunities from the birth to 8 from teachers in birth to 8, as well as the child development pieces for K through 3 and principals. And so I'm really hoping we think innovatively about how we do that in a way to get the best outcomes for kids. Let's see if there are any questions.
Well, to your point, I mean, I think it's imperative that the state communicate clearly to the local education agencies about what the opportunities are. But I think the real thrust of that sort of collaboration across that continuum will be contained in the LEA plans to a large degree. Is that an accurate statement, Donna?
I think that's accurate. And when I was thinking about collaboration, sort of a granular example came to mind. We typically host new directors training twice a year for what generally is about a 50% turnover rate for Title I directors across the state. And we always include and have great attendance in a session around how you fund preschool programs. And just in reflection of the discussion around birth to 8, just thought it might be interesting to share that probably 80% of school districts focus their Title I funds specifically on their K-5 program, and anywhere from 30 to 40 of those LEAs are also offering preschool programs with their Title I funds as well.
Great. Thanks, Donna. Okay, so I'm thinking, I'm not seeing questions pop up, so nor am I seeing people drop off, so I'm assuming, how will ESSA planning work with state's collaboration study to create, okay, so how will ESSA planning work with the state's collaboration study to create vision for early education? So I think the question, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that within the provision we held up at the beginning of this that calls for greater coordination, how will ESSA help be a vehicle for helping to bring that to the next level?
I think there's some great similarity, particularly around transition from pre-kindergarten into school-age programming that is defined both in the ESSA law and defined in the state provision. The tricky thing is related to the timelines and what is required in terms of studying that particular issue, putting some temporary transition activities in place, and then building towards some larger transition activities and a systemic state plan that's required by the General Assembly by a specific date. Certainly, the language specific to where we will be traveling in North Carolina around that issue can help inform the state ESSA plan, I think, in a very profound way. But really receiving the kind of input from valued stakeholders to inform both of those is critical to ending up with something that actually matters for young children and families. So just stay tuned.
Great. And I want to emphasize the other piece about federally looking at the regs. My understanding is that so they're not all out yet, right? They're being in the process of being developed, and that there's certainly a push, and there may be more regs that address early learning specifically. So we'll certainly share what we become aware of and ask you to do the same and pay attention to that. The other piece is through the Alliance for Early Success, Danielle Ewan is working specifically with them to provide assistance to states around the early learning provisions in Title I, and we will be reaching out to her to see because of opportunity, what actually rises in terms of specifics, and what does that mean? But we look to continue to figure out how to convene and engage our community around good guidance that's coming out federally as well. So I'm not job, and we're ready to put this slide big opportunity at the next level for us. So I want to thank you for your participation, and hope you have a wonderful weekend and stay cool. Thank you.